Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Thank you so much for joining us here on Health Professional Radio. We're going to speak with Kim Boericke. She's joining us here as Chief Delivery Officer at Thread. Thread is a platform for Decentralized Clinical Trials, or DCTs. She's going to discuss DCTs and some of the barriers that exist in traditional clinical trials. Welcome to Health Professional Radio, Kim Boericke.
Thank you very much for having me this morning.
Aside from being Chief Delivery Officer at Thread, give us a little bit of your story. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
So I've been in the drug development industry now for several decades. I've always been on the side of delivery of clinical trials for sponsors. Managed everything from early development, first in man, through post-marketing commitment studies and into launch and commercialization of products. I'm really excited to be here today to talk a little bit about decentralized trials. To me, it's definitely the wave of the future and a way to engage more patients and bring more patients into the clinical research or clinical as a care option. So very excited to talk to you today.
What exactly are decentralized clinical trials, or DCTs?
So a decentralized clinical trial is a trial that leverages technology to enable patient care to happen outside of a clinic. It could be a hybrid in which part of the visits are done within a clinic, seeing a physician and the study coordinator and other healthcare professionals on site, or it could be data that's collected at a patient's home or in other area outside of the clinic. Right now, most studies have some level of decentralized component to them. Specifically, you see a lot in clinical outcome assessments where we have moved to an e-COA environment. The e-COAs allow patients to complete their clinical assessments in the home at their convenience when the time is good for them.
With most of the trials now having some decentralized aspect to them, how are DCTs that much different from traditional clinical trials, and what are some of the barriers that DCTs are overcoming?
Honestly, from my perspective, it's starting to merge, and at some point, I hope it's just called clinical trials. I think the decentralized ability is really helping the site and the patient. So it's reducing the overall burden of conducting a clinical trial. There's a lot of data that is pulled in for trials. In a traditional manner for a patient, they would be called on by their investigator, by the physician at the site, asked if they're interested in participating in a trial. Usually the physician will outline the value or the benefit for the patient to be part of the trial. And then they would go through coming in on site to be consented. And then study would happen, which would require procedures happening at the office. In some cases, patients are sitting in an office for 12 to 14 hours a day to get all the procedures done for the visit based on the way the protocol has been written. And for patients that are still in the prime of their life and working, or parents trying to get kids to school or kids home from school, that can be a complete burden. It could be very much a big burden for them. The other challenges that you see in the traditional environment right now is that a standard patient comes from probably within a 50-mile radius of the site, so that they have the ability to get to the site for the regular visits that need to happen. So you're eliminating patients that fall outside of the 50-mile radius because it's just too much of a burden for them to get in for the regular visits that they need for the trial. Decentralized trials are the tools that allow for decentralization of the trial, enable patients to come from a farther distance because they don't have to make the journey, let's say, every week or every month based on the protocol design. They can eliminate a on-site visit at a physician's by using telepresence or a televisit or telehealth. They can also potentially deploy a nurse to the patient's home and have the procedures done in the patient's home instead of sending them to the site. By doing that, you enable more patients at a farther distance from the center to be able to participate in the trial. By using electronic COAs, so electronic way to get patient-reported outcomes, or sensors or wearables where they place them on their body and the readings just happen naturally, which could be as simple as, your Fitbit or your iWatch. Patient data then goes directly into the decentralized platform, and that is source data. and therefore they don't once again have to go to the site to have that data collected. It just comes in automatically and it's immediately sourced. So those are areas that help decrease the overall burden on the patient and their requirement of being at site for either protracted long periods of time or frequencies that don't really align with their life and their lifestyle.
Do these same tools offer a greater percentage of retention of these participants once a patient has gone through all of the things that they need to go to participate and actually are allowed to participate, being maybe in a remote area or farther away than the 50-mile radius? Do they remain in the trials consistently based on these DCTs?
Actually, we've seen much higher retention, especially when you get into the post-treatment phase of a study where you're really looking at long-term follow-up and safety. By using these type of tools, the patient can spread out their visits, and maybe they go to the clinic once a year instead of once a quarter or once a month. It makes it much easier for a patient that lives farther away to get on with their life, report their data in, still have that close communication with the physician through their televisit or just communication through the platform. But you're still able to monitor them and collect data on a regular basis that can be seen real time.
What is Thread doing uniquely to make DCTs more effective? I know you're talking about these tools. Are these tools that are used throughout people trying to implement DCTs, or is Thread unique in their approach?
Well, I personally think Thread's unique in its approach, but there's probably several areas where I feel that we really differentiate in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. The first one is we provide scientific expertise to help design trials. Traditionally, what we're seeing is that clinical trials are still written the exact way that they've always been written, which is very prescriptive. It's got a set number of visits. Most of the data is being collected by the physician while the patient is in the office. We have scientists that are able to work with our sponsors to develop better, more agile protocols that allow for the endpoints and the outcomes to still be collected, but not necessarily collected by a patient going physically to a site. So that's one area of differentiation. The second is our platform is fully configurable. And what that means is we don't have to custom design a platform for every trial that we're working on. It expedites the amount of time it takes for us to set up the platform and to set up the patient applications. So that it's a very easy and a very quick start for individuals that want to use aspects or the full platform to conduct their trials. I would say the other parts of it that make us unique is around our library. So we have a library of the most commonly used clinical outcome assessments already programmed and pre-authorized, which that means the only thing we need to do is go back to the author of the clinical outcome assessment to get the licensing approval to proceed. But all the programming and testing has already been done. So you can pull that clinical outcome from the library and embed it into your study very rapidly, which also, once again, decreases the amount of time it takes to configure the platform. So I would say those are probably our biggest areas of differentiation from some of our competitors out there.
U.S. FDA recently issued new draft guidance to enroll more participants from underrepresented racial and ethnic populations in these clinical trials. In your opinion, how will DCTs increase enrollment of these diverse populations?
As we move to the right study that allows for full decentralization, you can reach these emerging areas much easier because there's not the requirement of having a site that's standing up in the middle of these regions. The number of physicians that are actually conducting research tends to be on the smaller side, unfortunately. But the access that a patient now has to those physicians via telehealth and other ways of communicating will enable those populations to be able to start to participate in trials, and they can be used as a care option, which is another way of helping those patients in those areas to be able to participate because it becomes the way that they are actually treated for their condition. And so the trial goes on, but they're actually getting clinical care at the same time.
Give us a website where our listeners can learn more about Thread.
You can go to www.threadresearch.com.
Now, that's spelled just like it sounds, threadresearch.com, all one word, Thread Research?
Yes, it sounds exactly the same way and spelled exactly the same way. There will be a lot of news on, what's going on in the industry. It'll also show you, it'll outline all of our services and how we can support you to be able to enable you as a sponsor to conduct decentralized trials or to leverage tools that will enable your studies to enroll faster, retain patients longer.
Kim, thank you so much for your time this morning. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, hoping that you'll return.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard, in conversation with Kim Boericke, Chief Delivery Officer at Thread. Audio copies of this program are available at hpr.fm and healthprofessionalradio.com.au. You can also subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, listen in, download at SoundCloud, and be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/healthprofessionalradio.